Here now with more, the author of Trial of the Century, Fox News legal analyst Gregg Jarrett, also the author of the book Get Trump, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, and former acting attorney general Matthew Whitaker is with us. Guys, good to see you. Greg, let me start with you tonight, because one thing you keep referring to is the Presidential Records Act, conspicuously, in my view, absent any reference to thereof. Why would this be relevant in a case like this?
It's the main defense, and it's the prevailing, controlling law. The Presidential Records Act, a civil statute, gave Trump the right under the law to maintain custody and control of papers, whether they're classified or not, Sean. It's a civil, not criminal statute. Because it's a specific statute, it takes precedence over general statutes. And indeed, for more than a decade, the Department of Justice agreed with that. It became their own established standard. They even argued it in federal court in the Bill Clinton case, stating emphatically that Clinton was entitled to keep whatever he wanted after leaving office, whether it was classified or not. So that's Trump's main defense. And the judge in the case endorsed it. The judge ruled the National Archives doesn't have authority to decide presidential records, and that seizing them from a former president is unfounded and contrary to the law. So Trump relied on that standard. That should be his defense.
All right, let me go to the statement, Professor Dershowitz, today. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everybody. Then we can go to the tape that I just played. And in this particular case, it was James Comey admitting that Hillary had top-secret classified materials all over her servers. I would argue that deleting 33,000 subpoenaed emails and destroying devices that may have that information on it, that to me, and maybe I'm just old-fashioned, that would fit the classic definition of obstruction to me, but I'm not a prosecutor. Do we have the same standards being applied to Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, and Donald Trump in these cases?
I don't think we do. And Jack Smith tried to persuade us that we do. You know, he's probably listened to your show. And so he deliberately did not indict Trump under the provision of the statute.
Because of my show?
The provision that talks about
because of what he learned.
Well,
ahead,
no,
sir.
He didn't. Well, listen, he didn't indict him under the provision that talks about negligence. He indicted him on the much higher standard of willfulness, which will make it much harder to prove, but will allow him to say, see, this is distinguishable from Hillary Clinton. I'm not arguing negligence. I'm arguing willfulness. Look, there are only 2 paragraphs out of only almost 100 in the indictment that Donald Trump has anything to worry about. They're paragraphs 34 and 35 that disclose the tape, the consensually recorded tape that Trump allowed to take when he spoke to a writer about a book concerning Meadows, in which he essentially admitted that a document that he showed him, maybe just flashed it in front of him, we don't know, could have been declassified, but it was not declassified. Those are the only 2 paragraphs, 34 and 35, that I think are unanticipated and he has anything to worry about. The rest of them are covered either by the Records Act or lack of intent. It's very hard to prove the kind of level of intent. But the 2 paragraphs are troubling. The 2, and I think Trump's defense will probably be, look, I was just showing off. I didn't really show him these materials. I just let him see that we had them. He didn't read them. And of course, the government doesn't have the materials themselves. And so it's going to be hard to prove what's in them. But if I were Trump's lawyers, those are the 2 paragraphs I would be focusing on. I think the rest of it is duplicitous and typical and predictable and probably not criminal.
All right. So, Matt Whitaker, let me go to what James Comey said in the 3 days in October 2016. He talked about about top secret classified information being faxed and Hillary insisting or asking that the heading be removed, meaning the classification, but it didn't declassify the document. People that didn't have clearances, including lawyers and others, also looking at those documents, at least 10 people, they said at the time, foreign governments likely having hacked into that system. And then Comey's statement that 30,000 emails, forgetting the 33,000 she deleted, 110 of them in 52 email chains, determined by the owning agency to have classified information at the time they were sent or received. 8 of those chains had top secret, 36 had secret. Tell me how this in any way comports with the statement that was made by Jack Smith today, that we have one set of laws in the country that apply to everyone. Were the laws applied in that case?
Yeah, they weren't. And in that Hillary Clinton case, under the Jack Smith standard and this charging document, Hillary Clinton should have been charged on many, many counts of violating this statute. And this is the problem, is the equal justice under the law. That concept is out the window now because, again, that was just a fleeting moment in American history, I guess, where the FBI director can stand up and give somebody a pass. And now we have the Biden administration, through their special counsel, Jack Smith, who directly reports to Merrick Garland, is targeting their main political opponent. Listen, he stood up there today also and said that essentially he was representing the intelligence community as well. Guess who the intelligence community went after in 2015 and 2016? Donald Trump. And here we go again.
All right, Matt Whitaker, thank you. Alan Dershowitz, thank you. Greg, thank you.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.